Today, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, has announced a big shake-up. And this has come down to him deciding that he's going to cut and get rid of the NHS England body, or should I say arm's length body. And this is big because for those of you who don't understand what NHS England is, they are or were responsible for the commissioning and management of the wider NHS in order to not only help the Department of Health and Social Care make better decisions in terms of how money is distributed, but also in terms of helping the front line really manage and distribute money effectively. Because the challenge that we've had over a long period of time was that it was very difficult to understand how money should be distributed. Why do I know this stuff? My career was heavily in the NHS before I started to do contracting and consulting. And to be fair, my contracting and consulting career has heavily been influenced by what I did in the past. I've done commissioning in my previous sort of work experience over the past 5 years or so. So I understand how some of this stuff works. You know, you essentially understand that there's some sort of health need and you assess, analyze, speak to different individuals to understand what that need looks like. And then you take it to some sort of like forum to determine what priorities or what prioritization is in place in order to decide how the money is diverted. And then this is where you go to tender or you do, procurement or whatever it may be, finding the best suppliers to support and deliver on those services. And then you performance manage those individuals to understand if you're getting bang for your buck, because taxpayers' money is being spent. And so this needs to be understood. So I'm not saying everywhere in NHS England does this stuff. There are many other factions within there, whether that is finance or HR or workforce or digital or transformation or whatever it may be. There's a whole bunch of different stuff. But Keir Starmer's decided to get rid of it. Now I've got my notes here just to sort of like help me and everything else. But really his points, even before I get to his points, when he said it in the announcement, and I watched a shorter clip, I didn't watch the whole event that he was at, it felt very like unremorseful. And to be honest with you, I can hear him saying that there probably wasn't any remorse. Now whether this is a good or bad thing, only time will tell. But it's definitely not good for those individuals, those NHS England workers who are going to be at the brunt of this. There were clues towards this over the last couple of months, okay? And I can't give away too much information, but what I can say is that, we had already been privy to individuals who were potentially leaving, should we say. We had already heard, cuts being made to the centre, anywhere between 25 to 50% cuts. And so lots of things were bubbling in the air over the last couple of weeks/months. And so when Amanda Pritchard, who was leading the NHS, and now it's been I think the responsibility goes to someone called Jim or James Mackey, she's left. Okay, she's left. She left a couple of weeks ago, whatever it may be. So whenever that happens, that's how you know some mad changes are happening. So these people know this stuff in advance. Okay, so I felt like there's a lack of remorse in that way. And I think it was only the health minister, I forget his name, who's the only one, I think his name is Wes Streeting, who's the only one who only spoke to the fact that actually, he wants to thank all of those individuals working in NHS England, and there are some very bright and very smart individuals who work within that space. He's the only one who acknowledged that, but the Prime Minister didn't, based on what I heard, which is not a good look. Anyway, down to him, as per usual, as we always hear, this is because of the Conservative government, what they introduced back in maybe, I think, 2011, 2012, etc., etc. This is their fault, etc., etc. We're tired of hearing it, I'm not going to lie. It doesn't matter whether you're green, pink, blue, red, whatever. Just take ownership for what you have right now. And he would say, of course, well, we are taking ownership. This is why we're doing what we're doing. Okay, just stop repeating the past. That's what we don't want to. We're fed up of that because it's just boring. It's almost like, why are you making these decisions? Are you making these decisions because they're in support of the future? Or are you making these decisions because you want to get at the Tories or whatever it may be? Of course, that isn't the only reason. But I'm just saying that he just keeps on banging on about it. He just needs to stop now. It's getting too much. Anywho, Anywho, point being made is that he's made these decisions now, and there are people who are affected. Now, he's hoping to ensure that there is less bureaucracy. In other words, there are less individuals who are involved in actually supporting reforms and actually supporting, improving waiting times and, making sure that the 4-hour wait time is cut down from like 8 hours to actual 4 hours. All of these different things, streamlining services, making things more digital, which is aligned to the pursuit towards AI and everything within the UK. So he was wanting to cut bureaucracy. In addition to that, he's made it very clear that he wants to redirect this money towards hospitals, primary care. Primary care is basically, you could argue, the first line of defense when it comes to healthcare. So GPs, dentists, all of that kind of stuff there. And so really this is a decentralization. Decentralization meaning you're going from something that's more central to something that is more, not bipartisan, but, each area or locality makes the decisions in terms of how money is spent. And for some people that makes perfect sense. And that still could be okay. But there are still people who are affected. And I just want to acknowledge that because it's almost kind of being ignored in a way. It's kind of being ignored, like that just didn't happen. Of course, these changes are aimed to take place over the next 2 years. So with that in mind, there is some reorganization that needs to happen when it comes to individuals either working in regions, localities, hospitals, whatever it may be, probably doing similar jobs or the same job in some effect. But there is also going to be an exercise that is done to get rid of people. I mean, that's probably going to happen. And the NHS have a big, it's not even the NHS, the Department of Health has a huge thing on their hands where they're going to have to work out what do NHS terms and conditions look like. Are certain things honoured? They're probably going to have to be. Unions are probably going to get involved in some way, shape or form. There is probably going to be some sort of severance pay, okay? And what these public sector organisations or arms length bodies like to do is they like to long it out. They like to see who, is willing to hang around, who's willing to find a new job so they don't have to pay out X amounts of monies. Watch all of that play out for the 2 years. You see, it will definitely happen because that's happened already when they announced that there were going to be big cuts, I want to say 4 years ago. Probably around when I was still there. There's always cuts, but then they're always getting money. So it's this yo-yo effect. There's a lot going on. So there's going to be a lot of like increased decision when it comes to local authorities and all those different people making decisions. So the Department of Health and Social Care colleagues are going to have people sitting next to them working out who's supposed to do what. But let's be real. The estimate, I know they said 9,000, but the estimate is roughly between 6,000 to 10,000 jobs may be cut. And these will mainly be administrative roles. So middle management, senior management. We've definitely seen it in executive management. There's been a whole suite of people who have been told not to come back or have decided to quit. So we've seen this already for those of us who are within the space. So that means we've known of this, or they've known of it at least. But those who are less likely going to lose their jobs are clinical staff having clinical time. Because you have to remember, there are clinical staff within NHS England who act as advisors, adding towards the quality element, okay? But really, truly, it's going to be doctors, nurses, midwives. They probably won't lose their jobs. If anything, nothing's really changed from their standpoint. They probably just need to understand how they're going to get funding for some of the projects or initiatives that are in place. So there's a reorganization exercise that needs to happen. Of course, that's not going to happen straight away because, decisions are being made right now. This is the funding round. So any time between October to March, when really it's February to March, decisions are made in terms of how money is spent so that from the 5th of April onwards, it's game time. That money can be released in terms of paying for contractors, paying for new staff, paying for resources, paying for digital, paying for infrastructure, all of this kind of stuff there. But of course, like I said, because of this reorganization exercise, there's going to be administrative roles shifting into other areas. But just because all of this stuff is happening, there's going to be increased pressure also. There's going to be increased pressure from the Department of Health and Social Care, mainly the Department of Health, to perform. Now, of course, the argument is because there's going to be less bureaucracy, should I say, there isn't going to be this laser focus on performance per se, but there has to be some level of performance. Because now it's on, or will be on, the Department of Health to get things going. Now, beforehand, there used to be something called Public Health England. And that has now been subsumed into UKHSA, UK Health Security Agency, which was questioned by many people because of the whole security aspect within that title. And that was all pushed because of the whole COVID thing. And they felt like they didn't do well enough to protect the UK, or England, should I say. And I don't think that's fair. I think the government ignored some advice that happened back in 2005 to many different countries. And, well, we saw what happened. And so with that in mind, there's going to be more pressure, not just for the Department of Health, but also for local NHS trusts, primary care, local authorities, all that kind of stuff there. There's going to be more pressure to now reorganize themselves to ensure that they're providing the best sort of like approach towards ensuring that the population is safe, ensuring that the population is catered for when it comes to care. So yes, it comes with more autonomy, but it will come with more stress, especially to deliver results. But with that autonomy, they can shape and decide how they want things to look. I'm getting to a point here, so if you're still with me, you'll start to recognize there may be potential opportunity. Now, the next point I want to raise is that because of where we are with the world right now, because there'll be a devolved / decentralized sort of setup when it comes to healthcare, there is going to be a heavy push on transformation, specifically digital transformation. And that's great because that is what this country needs. You're seeing the Dubais, the Americas, Africa, all these different places are taking this on board, and we've been slow to do this stuff. And so if the unfortunate demise of NHS England requires that, then there's opportunity there. Now, the idea is that there would be less paperwork. There's been this whole sort of thing to make things as digital as possible in terms of health records, making sure that we have apps that we can sort of get information from and all that kind of stuff there. But we can admit it's kind of outdated. But there will be opportunities for digital health consultants. There will be opportunities for IT consultants. And this is all potential because we have to recognize that Mr. Sir Keir Starmer, can you say Mr. Sir Keir Starmer? Sir Keir Starmer said that consultancy spend will reduce. It will reduce. And of course, I believe at least he's speaking about the really big ones because, to be fair, they're a whole operation. But I still do believe for the SME, for the smaller solo consultant, there will be opportunity. Whether that will be easily marketable or understood by people like us is a different story. And this is where you have to look out for these opportunities on the right channels. Okay, speak to your recruiters, go in different procurement channels, all of that kind of stuff there. And so I think this is also an attempt to ensure there is increased efficiency. But it is a self-autonomous system that is required. So there is some thinking to be done around how all of this stuff will be managed and how procurement would work and all of that kind of stuff there. Now, with all of this in mind, on the flip side, if it means that actually the NHS is becoming worse, bearing in mind the pressures are coming from multiple different angles. Some may say immigration, okay? Others may say a rising sort of like population of individuals who are living for longer, which I believe is the main reason, if I'm honest with you. We are living for longer, okay? And if you think about the baby boomers who are now closer to the end of their sort of like tenure, that was so diplomatic, and the millennials, two biggest generations that have ever existed side by side in their middle parts of their lifespan. So it's ballooned. It's ballooned. So this is where the pressures have heavily come from, in addition to many other things around nepotism, which means poor leadership, which potentially means poor management of how things are done, lack of investment in ensuring that this country has the right sort of skills. I mean, look at places like India, yeah. Look at places like Singapore back in the day and where they are right now. Look at places like South Africa. Like, all these different countries took the opportunity to upskill. Taiwan's another example. They took the opportunity to upskill. And because our government was on their high horse, it doesn't matter whether they're red or blue or whatever it may be, we didn't have the opportunity to actually develop. In fact, the focus was heavily on, again, those individuals who were making the money moves, or those individuals who were lobbying for certain stuff. It was very old school, very imperialistic, so to speak. But this inflationary balloon was being created, which meant that you had this false economy and there was no substance being produced. And so this is why, as a service economy, for the last couple of months, our productivity has been 0%. You're telling me I've been working like crazy, regardless of whether I'm a permanent member of staff, consulting, contracting, whatever it may be, and productivity within the UK is 0 when I know I'm working my ass off. Insane. And yet America, their productivity is doing extremely well, despite everything that has been happening. So we have to consider the different types of culture that exists, that has been bred through the policies, the system which is upheld by the influential individuals who make decisions. And that does sometimes come down to, civil servants, institutions, Quangos, which I'm going to talk about at some point, and other sort of like bodies that truly make the decisions. Even the Supreme Court that was introduced by Gordon Brown back in 2009, I want to say, but I may have got that wrong. Decisions that are being made that are not central to government. So there's been a lot of change. Anyway, let's get back to what I was saying. So there are opportunities that could arise. This will heavily come in innovation and research. This will come in the form of EPRs. There's always stuff around EPRs. I think that's electronic patient health records, EPHRs. There's also going to be opportunities centered around, how do you make systems more efficient? So thinking about AI, how can you introduce AI into all of this stuff? There's a whole flurry of stuff that could be done, but it also means that there is opportunity for private sector healthcare companies, organizations, businesses to pop up. You watch, that's going to be happening more. And the UK is going to need it, but it's whether the people can afford it. That's going to be the next question. So has this opened up opportunity, especially for individuals within NHS England, to go out and do their own thing and actually set up their own enterprises? Whether that's from an advisory standpoint, from a consultancy standpoint, from a business standpoint. Again, the government doesn't think about this stuff, but there may be people, the very people that he's got rid of, that may rival the very sort of like public health or public, should I say, institutions that he's trying to back. Only time will tell. Only time will tell. So we'll see if different consulting individuals fill in that gap. So coming back to the whole portfolio career thing, this is where opportunity could pop up for an individual like you. It may not present itself clearly, but you have to find it. This is why doing the research is going to be important. And the 26th of March spring budget is also going to be very important as well. Also, there's something to be said for, it's funny, the very thing that they're getting rid of, they may need those individuals to support this thing. It just means there's less sort of like constraint and responsibility over making sure that these people are fed and paid and all of that kind of stuff there. What I mean is there will still be a need for PM support, so program and project management support, analysts, business analysts, transformation specialists, digital and tech specialists, all these different people, health strategists. These people are still going to be important. Advisory roles are going to be very important. So this stuff is not going anywhere. It just means all those people who are not able to address or lean into those opportunities are unfortunately the losers. But hopefully they can turn this into an opportunity for themselves. So I said I'd speak about Quango, okay? What is Quango? And I always forget what it means. It means quasi autonomous non-governmental organizations. Why am I mentioning Quangos? Well, it is the view of the Labour government that Quangos need to be cut. They need to be reduced. And there is a question of how these Quangos came into power. I guess, the Labour sort of like party would blame the Conservatives for bringing some of these individuals in, which is understandable because that definitely is the case. But it was also Blair who created this new sort of like era of ensuring that there was a certain level of KPIs and metrics and, understanding the performance of our public sector, which encouraged some of these Quangos to come into play. But now these Quangos are the ones making the decisions as opposed to vice versa. So that's quite interesting. But the excuse is that these cuts will help our country, sort of like be more agile by nature. When really we have to remember that actually our Prime Minister has been supporting Ukraine's endeavors based on the power of Russia, which means that it puts us in a very difficult position. We've made some budgetary and defense commitments to Ukraine, and we're making at least a minimum of 2.5% towards defense, which means that other areas need to be cut. Now, does this mean we're gearing up for war? I hope bloody not. I hope not. Now, of course, Ukraine, US, Russia are coming to some sort of ceasefire over the next 30 days once Russia is happy with the sort of like paperwork and stuff. But outside of that, okay, which is it's very dire what's happened over the last 3 years, not just in these countries, but with the 30 plus different wars happening across the world. It's very dire, and it's a shame that this stuff happens. The UK has positioned themselves in such a way where it feels like they are biting more than they can chew. Showing solidarity and showing position is great, but it also means that it positions you in a very difficult position that affects the rest of the country. And so it's thinking about all of this stuff. Like, what is the mindset of the government right now? What are they trying to do? And so thinking about all of this stuff, I start to think about global influence. So there is a greater push for digitization across different nations because of the things that ChatGPT has done and many other sort of like companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook, etc., etc. You got things pushed by the World Economic Forum, and so there are certain parliamentary individuals and members who are part of this forum where they meet in Davos each year since 1971, and they effectively decide what needs to be done across the globe. Of course, if they all have a particular viewpoint, let's say they're all sort of like globalist by nature and they're leftist by nature, then you're going to see a certain taste and approach to how government is done. Read in between the lines as you will, okay? This is me not suggesting anything, but I'm at least giving you information for you to decide for yourself. And so with that comes a certain form of centralization in terms of how things should maneuver and a restructuring of the systems. And so when you think about all of the stuff that's happening, it doesn't become a surprise, and it becomes actually a thing that makes more sense. It makes more sense. And so with this greater need for integration, unity, collaboration, which sounds fantastic, there are also consequences such as what we've seen today. And of course, Labour will always want to make the Conservatives look bad, and Conservatives will always want to make Labour look bad, vice versa. And so there is a reversal of certain reforms. I think it was the Lansley reforms back in 2012, which it ensures that they are working towards ensuring that people have better healthcare. So some questions I've written down. So really and truly, job losses in the short term, but potentially a more efficient NHS in the long term. Is that the case? Is that actually the case? Is this an opportunity to create centralized power? And if so, is that from a political standpoint, or is that from a local NHS standpoint? If it's the former, not good, because they're not the experts. If it's the latter, that is better, and that may create more innovation, and you've got something that actually may turn into something more technocratic. There's a question around that. Do we want more of a technocratic society? Difficult to say, because if everything we are hearing is centered around AI and technology, then doesn't that lean into something that's more technocratic by nature? Then who's actually running things? Because what I learned when I was commissioning back in the day, or just after that, is that you could have your best interests when it comes to, I guess, performance managing these technological organizations and companies, but they know best. And so you typically, the commissioner doesn't have the up-to-date knowledge and information in terms of how these things work, especially because technology updates very rapidly. I think it's Moore's law. Moore's law states that a computer's processing power doubles every 18 to 24 months. So let's see how that turns, okay? And of course, we've got this government for another 3.5 to 4 years, so we'll see what happens. Will it improve patient care, or will it just shift bureaucracy and management and all of that stuff elsewhere? Big question. And what will happen to the private sector involvement? So does this accelerate NHS privatization? Does it make it more or less likely? All questions that need to be answered. What we do know is that a fix is needed. Whether this is the solution or not, I can't conclusively say. What I will say is I will be looking out for opportunities, and you should too. Because as much as it's very painful and sad that a lot of these people I know, people I talk to on a regular basis, are going to be affected by this, we have to fight by ensuring that we find something that suits us. And if it means diverging out of, let's say, the NHS or the healthcare sector, or even the public sector for that matter, how can we set up our portfolio career in such a way that regardless of whatever happens, we are set, whether that is in this country or outside of this country? So this is a slightly different twist to what I usually do, but I thought I wanted to talk about this today. If you enjoyed this video, let me know. I'd love to know your thoughts below. And yeah, just interested to see what your views are. Why do you think this was done? What sort of effects do you think this is going to have? And what opportunity, if any, do you think would be available? If you want to see more videos centered around portfolio careers and contracting, consulting, leadership, all that kind of stuff, then don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.